Why does making friends as an adult feel so
What
hard?
should I wear on a first
What the
date?
hell is a form?
But that
Why
hookup
is
was
buying my
not
first
good.
home
So
What do I want my
frustrating.
life to look like in 5 years?
We want to know too.
Since 2012, the Every Girl has been an online destination to help women around the world achieve the life of their dreams. Now, we're excited to bring you the same inspiring content with the Every Girl podcast.
My single girls, my dating girls, my lover girls, I have the episode for you today. This conversation packs a lot of great insight. Whether you're swiping on dating apps, dreading first dates, or you want to know how to make a relationship actually last. Logan Ury is on the podcast today. She's a behavioral scientist, dating coach, Hinge's director of relationship science, and author of the book, How Not to Die Alone, The Surprising Science That Will Help You Find Love. She was just on Khloe Kardashian's podcast to give Khloe advice on dating because Logan is the relationship expert. She's like the dating whisperer. I love approaching love and dating from a very psychological angle, and Logan is the perfect person to answer all of your dating and relationship qualms. We chat about the biggest mistakes Millennials and Gen Z are making when it comes to relationships, why online dating feels so exhausting and what to do about it, tips to meet people in real life, toxic patterns that could be sabotaging your relationship, and Logan's surprising take on, quote, the spark, and why it might be sabotaging your love life. This conversation is packed with science-backed advice that will completely shift the way you think about relationships and might just change your dating life forever. Welcome, Logan Ury, to the Every Girl podcast. You have such a fascinating approach to love and dating. What experiences or research have significantly impacted your approach to helping clients find lasting love?
I have always been interested in dating and in relationships. And after I graduated from college, I was working at Google and I was running the behavioral science team there. So applying these lessons from psychology and how people make decisions to Google products. But at that time, I was super interested in dating, and dating apps had just come out. It was like right around the time that Tinder just launched. And I put together this series where I'd invite experts in to talk about dating. And I felt like there was so much interest from other people. There was so much interest from me that ever since then, so 10 years ago, I've been figuring out ways to work in this field.
It's also such a fascinating field because so much I feel like is changing now after it not really changing for hundreds of years. And now all of a sudden dating and marriage and what relationships look like are very, very different, especially getting into, your late 20s and 30s. Something that a lot of people start wondering is, why have I not found the one? Whether it's people are going on date after date with no success, they're getting into a relationship that never work out. So why are people struggling so much to find their life partner?
So I work with a lot of people in a coaching capacity, and then I also am the director of relationship science at Hinge. So I have access to a lot of data around how millions of people date and really thinking about what people are struggling with, where people are finding success, what the people who find love are doing differently, and how we can use that to teach other people. And so I think it does depend on the person and what they struggle with. In my coaching, I work with people, and in the first session, we do their relationship history or relationship audit. We really go through, have you been in relationships before? If so, with whom? How did you meet? Why did it end? What did you like about them? What did you not like about them? And as I listen, I'm really looking for themes and trends. And so that by the end of that first call, I can really help them understand what's been going on. So it might be something like, well, you seem to go for people who are not as interested in you, and then you try to convince them to be with you. And then that doesn't end up working out. So we need to work on figuring out who you want and how to really figure out what that's like and then help you go after it. And we need to break this pattern of you seeking people who are not interested and turning it into a challenge. And so I think there are different issues for different people, but a lot of them fit into these certain trends. And I call that the 3 dating tendencies. And that's a framework that I've come up with to help people understand what might be holding them back.
What are the 3 dating tendencies?
I found that a lot of people have unrealistic expectations. And so I've categorized it into these 3 ways. So the first one is the romanticizer, and they have unrealistic expectations of relationships. So they really want the love at first sight, the soulmate. I'll know it when I see it. And they often struggle because they're not willing to be realistic about finding love, or they might feel like, oh, well, that person doesn't come in the physical package I was expecting. And then the second one is the maximizer, and they have unrealistic expectations of their partner. So this is the person who's looking for someone perfect. They're always searching. They feel like, I need someone who's perfect, and that's when I can stop looking. And so they're always looking for the next best thing as opposed to finding someone great and building with them. And then the third one is the hesitator, and they really struggle with unrealistic expectations of themselves. So this is the kind of person who's not dating at all, because they feel like, oh, I'm just not the person I want to be at. And what if I meet someone great, but they don't fall for me because I'm not successful enough or beautiful enough yet? And they want to keep working on themselves and not put themselves out there. And people can take the quiz on my website or find it in my book. It's really helpful to have language around this stuff so that you can really understand for yourself, oh, I'm a maximizer. I'm always looking for something better. How can I actually be satisfied with what I have and work on building a life versus always looking for something else?
That's really fascinating to put it in those kind of personas. I can pinpoint people I know, including myself, what I've been in the past, that fall into exactly those different archetypes. You nailed so many of my friends.
What do you think you were?
I was definitely a maximizer where I had very kind of unrealistic maybe expectations. And I'm now engaged. I've been with my fiance for 8 years. So it's been a while since I've been in the dating pond, but it definitely impacted my relationship too, because I was like, okay, I find someone fits so much of what I want, but then that perfection tendency still shows up. So do you find some of those that continue to show up in relationships?
People can definitely change over time. So, for example, I can help a lot of hesitators get back out there. And for a maximizer, they can understand that, of course, there's no such thing as a perfect person, and you're going to have to make compromises in certain places. And it's all about figuring out what you really want, doubling down on that, and then being willing to compromise in other ways. These things can show up in relationships as well. For example, a romanticizer might think, why are we fighting? If we're fighting, then this must not be the right relationship because it should be effortless. When actually fights and disagreements are a natural part of living with someone or being in a relationship with someone, because you're not identical and you don't always see things the same way. These things can carry on into relationships. And the work that I try to do is help people understand where these things come from and then how to deal with them as they come up. What I really focus on is what are the patterns that are holding them back and what are the blind spots. And so really understanding, look, this is how you've been dating. It hasn't been working out for you. If you want to get a different result, you're going to have to date differently. And here's what to do.
And I would imagine that every single one of those archetypes have different, okay, you have to start thinking differently. You have to put yourself out there in these certain ways.
Yeah. So, for the hesitator, a lot of it is just getting started. It's understanding that no one's ever 100% ready for anything. It's better to learn by trying and growing as a dater, learning more about the type of person you want to be with, and understanding that you will make mistakes. And that if you wait at home until you're 100% ready, you'll never start. For the maximizer, it's really about understanding that at a certain point, you've probably dated enough people to know who might be a good match for you. And it's about finding somebody and really working with them to create the life you want versus perpetually searching.
And for the romanticizer, I think that's a question a lot of people have, because we do have these ideas of what love and relationships are supposed to be. And it's a hard balance to find, because a lot of us are like, well, that's good that our standards are high. Hello, me. But then also, if you are so unrealistic, then it holds you back. So how do you find that balance between keeping your standards so that you're not, quote unquote, settling, and still being realistic so that you're not limiting a relationship that could actually make you happy?
It is hard for romanticizers. I definitely hear from people who are like, you're telling me to settle. And settle has become the S word for them, this bad word. And it's not about settling. It's about understanding that you're not perfect. The person you end up with isn't going to be perfect. You are going to have disagreements. There are places where you need to compromise. Having this work it out mindset, the idea that as problems come up, you'll deal with them, as opposed to the soulmate mindset. Well, if I find my soulmate, then everything will be perfect. Understanding that work it out mindset is really what propels healthy couples forward. For the romanticizer, they need to worry less about the we met story, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how you met. The romantic thing is that you met at all.
I know, especially with online dating, which we'll definitely get into, I have some friends that were like, I don't want to online date because I don't want to say that I found my person
Yeah.
via an app. And it's like, well, who cares? If you found them, you found them. You know, like it's better to have a whole lifetime of happiness or a whole relationship with someone instead of
Yeah.
having the perfect meet cute. But there is a lot of pressure in today's world to like have everything look and appear perfect. So I completely understand the pressure, and it's great advice to be really self-aware of where those patterns are actually not helping you find love. They're holding you back from it.
Exactly.
So I know you've worked with and studied a lot of relationships in Gen Z and millennials. What are the biggest misconceptions or mistakes that you see in these generations trying to find lasting love?
One interesting thing that I found in my research is around Gen Z and not being willing to take risks. And I'm curious if that's something that you've seen when talking to your listeners.
Oh, 100%. People are afraid to put themselves out there.
Yeah, that's definitely what I've seen in my research at Hinge, just a sense of, well, I don't want to be rejected and I don't want to embarrass myself. In dating, you do have to shoot your shot, and sometimes you are rejected, but it gets you close to your goal because you build up that resilience. You figure out how to ask for what you want. And even if you hear a lot of no's, I really feel like that gets you closer to a yes. I'm wondering like what you hear from your listeners around this or like in your own life.
What I hear a lot are people that, especially now that online dating is a thing, it kind of feels creepy or weird to go up to people in real life. I also hear a lot of, when it does come to online dating, I don't want to be the person to ask this person out. And even I know from a lot of people that they're like, okay, yeah, I'm talking to people, but I don't want to actually go on the date because it's that fear of like, what if they're disappointed in real life? I think there's so much more, it feels like at stake nowadays with dating for some reason, where your self-worth on the line almost.
Yeah, I mean, I do get that. I feel like you're putting yourself forward and somebody's evaluating you and saying, yes, I want to see you again, or no, I don't. And obviously, there's a lot of ghosting happening. So I understand why it feels very vulnerable for people. But I think dating has always been vulnerable. And I'm worried about people who are not putting themselves out there to even have that interaction that they can grow from.
Especially, it's a numbers game. We often think if someone rejects me, then that means that I'm not worthy. That means I'm not good enough. That means I'm not beautiful in person, or that means I'm not interesting. When in reality, they just didn't connect with you. And the odds are that most people are not going to connect with you. You're not trying to like feed your ego on dates. You're trying to find someone that is going to match and be compatible with you. So that requires that not everybody is going to be compatible with you. And we logically know that. And yet people struggle with feeling rejection when it comes to dating. What are some tips that you have for people to get over that?
I think it's very natural to deal with rejection in dating, and I understand and I have empathy for it. I think it's about building up rejection resilience. And so understanding that hearing no's gets you closer to a yes. Nobody gets their dream job by just waiting for a LinkedIn recruiter to message them. They have to go out and get it. And the same thing is true in dating, that you really have to go after what you want and you have to be really clear and intentional. I don't think that the solution is to avoid rejection or to even say, I'm going to learn to love rejection. I think instead is to understand that rejection is a necessary part of achieving this goal. If you want to find love, if you're interested in dating and finding a partner, then yes, you will feel rejection along the way. And that's also true in finding a job or finding an apartment. Most things in life that are worth going after are things where you're taking a risk and you might hear a no.
And it's almost like, thank God, because if we were compatible with every single person we went on a date with, then having a relationship wouldn't feel so special. Like then relationships wouldn't last because we would feel like, well, there's thousands of other people I'm compatible with. So I think that's great advice. With gender roles changing, with the current state of the world, like there are so many things that are impacting our dating culture. I think there's a lot more people that are even unsure if they even want to be in a relationship. So I'm curious, knowing all of these things, How is our view of dating and relationships really different from years or generations in the past?
So, what we see in our research at Hinge is that a lot of people, especially a lot of Gen Zers, are really interested in finding somebody for the long term. They want to find that one person. They want to get married and have kids. I've been monitoring the cultural conversation. I think there's been a lot of people talking about how Gen Z is less interested in dating. But what we're seeing at Hinge is when we do research with Gen Z, they're really telling us, I want to find someone. And so I think that people right now are struggling and it feels harder to connect. And I think working from home has impacted this. People who came of age during the pandemic and are missing some crucial social skills. I think all of those are relevant components, but I've been very happy to see that there's still a lot of interest in finding your person and building a life with someone.
That's so interesting how popular it still is. And I think that makes sense. It's not for everyone, but it's a very innate thing to want to bond with someone for life. So that's interesting because, yeah, you just don't hear that as much in the conversation, especially as women. We, thank God, our generation, more than any other generation prior, have kind of had the choice of, I don't want to get married. I want to have a career and I want to focus on other things that's not raising a family. Like, we as women have so much more choice than what we had even one generation prior. And so it just is interesting that it's still a priority. I don't think that's bad or good. I just think that's really interesting because it's not as much what we talk about in mainstream.
Yeah. That's exactly how I feel. So at Hinge, we've done these Gen Z reports for the last few years. We have an LGBTQ plus report every year. And so we really interview and survey thousands of people. And I'm always looking for what's changed, what's different, what can I learn? And I think it's been so interesting to see not just that people are still very hopeful about finding love, but that it's especially true with Gen Z. And I might have predicted the opposite.
So you think even more so than millennial, or it's just the same with millennial?
Yeah, I can't remember the stat off the top of my head, but yes, we've found that Gen Z in some ways is actually even more romantic, and they were more likely than millennials to say that they believe that there's a soulmate out there for them.
That is blowing my mind because that is not what I would have thought at all.
I know, right? You hear about Gen Z being so nihilistic, and
Yes.
I think it's interesting. I think that you can both feel like at the end of the day, life is hard and will I ever retire? Will I be able to buy a house? And I think that there's truly a lot of economic stressors that are present for people. But at the same time, people know that finding a partner can be really fulfilling and they still feel hopeful and optimistic.
I want to dive into online dating, the dating apps, because almost all couples that I know that met after college met on a dating app. But then you also hear that it gets so exhausting. You get dating app fatigue. How do we avoid burnout on dating apps?
So, one of the biggest reasons why people feel burnout is feeling like people aren't responding to them on the app. So, feeling like we exchanged a bunch of messages or we matched and then I don't hear back from them. A lot of burnout is just people feeling overwhelmed by options or overwhelmed by not knowing what to do next. And so, Hinge actually came out with something at the end of last year called Your Turn Limits that's specifically supposed to help with this problem of burnout. The idea is that when somebody has a bunch of conversations where they owe the other person a response, they need to either respond to some of those people or close out of those conversations before they can match with someone new. And I love this because I feel like it's a really clever way of using the app experience itself to sort of educate and nudge someone toward the right behavior. Instead of talking to 8 or more people at the same time and letting some of those fizzle, it's better to move a bit more slowly and to actually talk to someone, get to a point where you say, I want to meet up with them. Okay, great. Ask them on a date, or I'm not interested. Great. Close it out. It's just a healthier, more sustainable way to date.
And that makes sense to be a lot more intentional. I've heard from friends and from other listeners of why dating feels exhausting or maybe toxic. Sometimes it's because it feels like it gamifies something like romance because you're just sitting there swiping. But that's because you're not being intentional about it, being intentional about the amount of people that you're connecting with and being really intentional about your experience.
Yes, I think intentional is definitely the right word. So when I work with people in coaching, they may want to give up at a certain point, or they may feel like it's never going to work out. But the closer that we can get them to really understanding their goals and being motivated by them, the easier it is to get them to take action. And so when somebody says, I just got my heart broken, I'm never going to date again, like, of course, I'll give them space to heal. But I also remind them, like, you told me that you want a wife and a family, or you told me that you want a husband and a family. And so the thing about dating is you have to get good at dating to meet someone, and then hopefully you never have to date again. It's kind of one of those things where like, it's not that everyone finds dating to be so fun. I think if you're more introverted, then your battery can get low. Of course, it makes sense that somebody would feel frustrated, but if you're really, really sure that you want to meet someone, you just have to keep going. The truth is that the number one way that people have met since 2017, so almost 10 years ago, is meeting online. And so if you're serious about meeting somebody, then meeting on an app is the most common way that that's going to happen.
Yeah, statistically speaking, it's the best chance that you have. And I also think it's the coolest thing because it connects you to so many people that you would otherwise never have crossed paths with. And that's why there is such a high success rate.
I mean, if you look back to pre-online dating, you really were connected to your friends, maybe some friends of friends, and people at work. And that was especially hard for people in the LGBTQ plus community, people who lived in rural areas, people who were over 50. And now there's just so many more opportunities to meet people in your neighborhood, around the country, and just really connect with people who you would have had no easy way of meeting previously.
I'm curious if you have any like statistics or data behind how many dates to be going on that's quote unquote normal. I know there's probably no right answer, but I'm thinking for the listener, the person out there who's like, I feel exhausted because I feel like I've been on so many dates and they haven't worked out. Is there something that they're doing wrong to make those dates not be turning into something more?
It's a great question. I definitely experience this a lot with my coaching clients. So I have had people over the years who come to me and they say, Logan, I've dated 100 guys in the last 2 years and nothing has worked out. I need to move. There's no good guys out there. And when I hear that, I'm like, what's the common denominator out of these 100 dates? It's you. Not that I'm blaming the person, but I'm saying like, I don't think that the answer is that you need to leave where you live. I think you need to really figure out what you're doing to contribute to this. So it does depend on the person, but a conversation that I might have with them is around what type of person are you going out with in the first place? Do you have a specific type? Oh, I only like the party boy, or I only like a guy who's this tall, and helping them understand, well, you've dated a bunch of people like that and it hasn't worked out. So maybe you need to change your type. Or I'll meet them and they'll seem really negative and burned out. And I'm like, if I met you right now on a date, I don't think I'd be interested in going on a second date with you. So you need to take a step back and actually refresh and feel more positive and figure out how you want to present yourself, because I think you could go on a bunch of dates when you're burned out and it wouldn't lead to connection, because people can absolutely pick up on that energy. And if you're really negative and not having a good time, why would somebody want to see you again? At the end of the day, a lot of dating is, did I enjoy spending time with that person? Do I want to spend more time with them? If you're not having fun, it's unlikely that they will have fun. And another thing I would say to them is, it's not about just like running a marathon and always going and going. I think you can take pauses here and there when you need to. But if you really know the direction that you're headed in, I want a family, I want a spouse, or I want a long-term partner, then I think it helps people stay motivated. So I would say burnout is real. A lot of people do feel overwhelmed and exhausted when it comes to dating. I would really encourage those people to take breaks, look at their past patterns, look at their blind spots, figuring out what their dating tendency is, asking friends for feedback, and then just understanding that if they have this goal, then they should keep going.
To me, that feels so empowering. I live in LA, so I hear this a lot about like, there's no good men in LA. And that maybe might be true for LA. But whenever I hear that, I'm like, that's so limiting. That's so negative to say there's no good guys out there. The problem is everywhere else besides me. That must feel so unempowered because you feel so out of control. So while those may be hard truths, to realize it's actually about what I'm doing, what I'm putting out there, the person that I'm choosing, that is empowering because then you have control. You can change it.
There's a story that I read about in my book where this woman is kind of one of those people, oh, there's no good guys, I can't meet anyone. And then I actually set up this thing for her where it was a mock date. And what I heard later from the guy was that she was super overwhelming. She was barreling over him. She was kind of performing versus connecting. And when I told her that, she was actually really relieved, because she's like, oh, there's something that I'm doing and I can change it. And it's not just that there's no good guys here. I do feel like for people who think like, oh, there's no good guys where I live, or there's no good girls where I would live, look, like maybe that's true. I don't know where you live. But at the end of the day, you should really start thinking, what are things that you can do to date differently?
Are there certain things that they should be looking for? Is there something that they can look at of like how to identify if it's something that they're doing?
The 3 dating tendencies that I told you about, and there's a quiz on my website and in my book, I think all of that can be really helpful because if you're a hesitator and you recognize that, you can just say, yes, I'm not putting myself out there for these reasons. And you can really go deep on that. I think for the maximizer people, they can understand. I've really had unrealistic expectations of the kind of person I can be with. And what does that mean about me? Does it mean that I want to feel like I can walk through the world with a really tall guy because that's how I want other people to see me? Well, can you get over that? Can you understand that that's not what's going to lead to relationship success? What's going to lead to relationship success is somebody that's really compassionate and kind and honest and you can have hard conversations with. And so I think that for people who are experiencing this, I would say sit down with a journal, sit down with a friend, sit down with a therapist, go through your past relationships and think about what are common themes that have left me disappointed. If I'm usually the one to end things, why am I leaving relationships too early? Am I leaving them too late? I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen here, and it is more psychological work. But I think just understanding that you are, of course, 50% of every date that you go on and taking responsibility for that and also feeling empowered by that to make a change moving forward.
You also mentioned earlier changing your type might be a big help to having dating be more successful to you. And I'm curious to know, is changing your type possible? I'm thinking for the person out there. I mean, it's like the cliche of, the person that likes only bad boys and they find this very nice, stable guy and they're like, I'm bored. I'm not interested. I'm not attracted to them. Is it possible to change your tastes?
So in the research that I've seen, if you go on a date with someone and you feel 0% attracted to them, I don't think on date 2 it's suddenly going to grow. But attraction can definitely grow over time. We know that among happy couples, only 11% of them felt love at first sight. I think that
Wow.
this can definitely grow as people get to know each other and they say, wow, this person's so funny. They're so interesting. They're so smart. They're so athletic, whatever it is for them. And so I think, first of all, just being open to the fact that attraction can grow. The other thing is attachment styles do play a huge role in who we're attracted to. So for a lot of my female clients, they might be more anxiously attached and they always like these guys that they have to chase and that they have to prove their value to. And what's really going on there is they are in an anxious avoidant loop. They are chasing after this guy pulls away, it's very exciting for them, or the guy's hot and cold, and that gives them a feeling of, does he like me or not? And then they really are addicted to that feeling. And then when I talk to them about attachment theory and going after someone secure, I really feel like that's a huge unlock for people because they can now recategorize it from, oh, he's so mysterious and I'm always thinking about him and I have chemistry with him and butterflies, to he's not upfront with me about how he feels. It's actually anxiety that I'm feeling, not chemistry. And next time a guy does that, I can recognize it as a red flag and run in the opposite direction.
That's really interesting. I've heard that some people confuse attraction with anxiety.
Your definition of love forms over time. And if you feel like love is that exciting feeling of, are they interested in me or not, then that's what you're going to pursue. But if you feel like love is you choose someone and they choose you back, that's a completely different dynamic.
I'm sure it's like such a mind-blowing moment for a lot of your clients and hopefully a lot of our listeners that would like to find out what part they're playing in their current dating life, have these aha moments of like, oh yeah, I am in control. Something that I'm doing is affecting the outcome that I have and I can change it. I can be aware of it and work on it so that I don't have the same results that I've had thus far. When it comes to online dating, are there any tips that you have to be more successful? Is there any good like openers that you give your clients? Anything to help make that online dating feel a little bit more engaging and positive and also have more success?
The first thing is really having a great profile. And this is something that we've been doing a lot of research on at Hinge over the last 5 years. And so I'll give you some of the top tips for a great profile.
Yes.
So a profile should really tell your story and show off different sides of yourself. So if you are really into running, then that's great. You can have a photo of you running and talk about running in one of your prompt responses, but don't make every single picture or every single response about running. Make sure that you're showing variety. People also want to see some humor and some vulnerability. They don't want you to be like all silly and all serious. when it comes to the photos, the first photo should make it very clear what you look like. So that's often just a headshot. I don't mean a professional headshot, but just this is my face with good lighting and I'm not wearing sunglasses or using a filter. And then the different combination of photos that you should use are one of your full body, one of you doing an activity that you love, and one with friends and family. And in general, we found that selfies actually don't perform as well, especially not gym selfies. And so take a look at your profile and see, are people seeing different sides of who you are? Is it easy for people to see what you look like? Are you showing friends and family an activity you love? Your profile is this chance to start a conversation. And so it's great to answer something about yourself and then ask a question so that it's easy for somebody to follow up with you.
Do you find that there's a difference in what different genders prefer? Like, do men tend to gravitate towards different things on a profile than women would?
That's interesting. So the research we did was with men and women and non-binary folks. And so it was sort of a summary of overall what people were interested in. Yes, I do feel like if you showed a bunch of pictures of yourself to guys and to girls, you might get different feedback on which pictures to include.
I asked this because I have a friend who is on Hinge looking for men and women. And she's like, I feel like I have to change my dating profile depending on what I want because I feel like my profile for men is different than my profile for women.
Yeah, I actually just recently had a conversation with a dater like that who dates both men and women. And she was saying how different people respond to different parts of her profile. And it's something she has to be strategic about in including both. And so, yes, I just similarly had that kind of interaction was like, wow, that is an interesting way to have to balance things on your profile.
Yeah. Those tips are really helpful, though, because especially when it's like your little profile, where you're showing yourself to the world and it's overwhelming.
Yes. And I think at the end of the day, it goes back to what we were talking about, which is learn how to date so that you can finally stop dating. And yes, sometimes it can feel intimidating. I have to explain my whole personality in this one little app profile. And it's like, no, tell us a bit about who you are, be ready to engage in conversations, have a variety of photos. But really, the true connection is going to happen on the date itself. And so use Hinge, use messaging to get to the date, and then use the date as really the chance to figure out, is this someone you want to see again?
One of the most common questions that we get about dating from listeners is, how do we meet people in real life?
This is definitely something that I've been hearing about a lot. Last summer we were talking about run clubs and everyone doing that. What I've found anecdotally is that a lot of people want to meet offline, but I just don't hear about that as much. And I feel like that's going back to the rejection resilience part. If you're not willing to be rejected, then maybe you don't go up to somebody and meet them in person and ask them out. If you are interested in doing that, activities where you're going to see people over and over again are much easier than like one time at a bar or a party. So can you volunteer and join a group that meets every week or every month? Can you actually throw an event, and can you invite people to a meetup that meets at a certain cadence? What are ways that you can actually expose yourself to new people and expand your network? There's also this concept called weak ties. When you're looking for your next job, it's unlikely you're going to get it from a friend. And it's more likely that you'll get it from a weak tie, which is an acquaintance. So you and your friends might have such overlapping networks that you know about the same people or the same opportunities, but a weak tie has a different network than you. And so what can you do to really put yourself out there and ask people that you know or people you used to work with, hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm about. Do you know anyone great who you could introduce me to? And it is vulnerable, but you have to take risks like that to allow yourself to expand your network.
And at the end of the day, like, no one's judging. If someone were to come up to us and be like, hey, I'm single, I'm looking for XYZ, do you have anyone you know? We would never be like, oh, what a weirdo. We'd be like, oh my God, of course. Like, it's fun to play matchmaker for everybody. So it's never perceived weirdly.
Right. And I think like the worst thing that can happen is they say, no, I don't know anyone great. It's like you're no worse off. And I think that actually people do admire the vulnerability and they might feel like, oh, I'm so glad you told me and I'm going to keep this in mind. Those things are scary. And I understand why people are hesitant to do them. But I really have seen that the people I know that are willing to put them out there the most and put the most effort in, it takes time, but eventually they do find someone.
Yeah. It's about putting in that effort. If you are to see someone that you're interested in, what is the best way to approach them? Is there any kind of like formula that you like to go to? What is the right way to approach someone, approach a stranger that we are interested in?
The best thing to do is just comment on something going on. So you might say, oh, have you ever been here before? Do you know any good drinks? Or even, do you know where the bathroom is? Or why is everyone waiting in that line? I think it's kind of like how it's so easy to get into conversations at the airport because there's a shared experience of waiting in line at TSA or waiting in line to board or wondering when the plane is going to take off. And so I think that if you just can create an atmosphere of we're both in this space and we're having a shared experience, what can you do to comment on that and to create some closeness there? So I think asking a question, giving a recommendation, or just making a comment on where you are is a great way to break the ice. And then from there, of course, ask people about themselves, share about who you are. It is scary to meet new people, but that's also one of the best ways to expand your network.
And it's such a practice thing. Like the more that you do it, the more you realize how not scary it is. I mean, this is so easy for me to say being in a relationship, but that's a fun part of going out is that you're expanding your network, you're meeting new people. And so maybe it's like tapping into the mindset of like, there's actually no stakes. It's no big deal to go up and say hi to someone. If they walk away or if they're not engaging, it doesn't matter. Like then you're not at a loss.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's definitely something that I coach people on where I'm like, if you never go up to anyone until you see someone you're super attracted to and then you want to approach them, you just won't have that as a muscle that you've built. But if you go up to a lot of people, not because you're interested in them, but just to practice and to make a new friend and expand your network, then when you do see someone you're really attracted to, there's a much higher chance that you'll be able to have that great conversation. And so I think just practicing flirting, practicing connecting, and practice speaking to strangers, those are all really good skills for people to work on.
That's such a great way to look at it. It's like whenever you're out, practice talking to strangers so that when you see someone interesting, then you feel good to do that. First dates, especially, can be so nerve-wracking and so awkward. They so often feel like job interviews. How can we make first dates feel actually really fun and enjoyable?
The first thing is understanding the point of a first date. So the point of a first date is not to decide if you want to marry this person. It's to decide if you want to see them again. And I hope that that takes the pressure off for people. And so really going there and saying, I'm going to have an experience with them. I'm going to show them what I'm like. I'm going to see what they're like. And we're going to decide, do we have fun together? The other thing is being really good at asking questions. So people really want to feel interesting. And the best way to do that is to act interested and to ask them questions about who they are and what they think about, while also making sure that they're asking you questions back. So a big point of contention that I hear about on a lot of first dates is people who are ZQ or someone who asks 0 questions. That's also a mistake that a lot of people are making, is that they're letting the other person ask them a lot of questions, but they're not asking questions back.
I feel like I hear about that so much. That seems to be like the number one complaint I hear from friends after dates is like, they didn't ask me a single question. I sat there literally interviewing them and they didn't ask questions. And it's mind blowing to me. Don't people get bored when they're talking about themselves? Like, don't you want to know about other people? But it's good to remember when you're on a first date.
I've said to people, like, if you are someone that doesn't ask a lot of questions on dates, like, what's going on? And they'll often say, oh, well, I give my answer and I assume if they want to give theirs, they will too. And I'm like, no, you really need to give them space and ask them. But for the people who are only asking questions, I also say to them, are you doing this because it's from anxiety? So maybe you feel like, oh, I have to fill the space. If there's any awkward silence, that would be terrible. And so for those people, it can also be about allowing there to be a moment of no one talking. And if you feel yourself asking too many questions, then take a sip of water, sit back, and let them ask you something. I do think that a lot of people just don't have the conversational training, but I also think for people who find themselves on the receiving end of no questions, what are things that you can do to actually create space?
I think that's also really helpful for people who go into dates being so panicked about like, I have to be really interesting. I have to dazzle them and entertain them. And what I have found, like, this is the hill I will die on. My listeners have heard me say this 1,000 times. To be liked, I think it's not a matter of being really interesting. It's a matter of being interested. When someone feels liked by you, that's when they like you. And it's so much simpler than people think. I talk about this just in the concept of meeting friends, acquaintances, colleagues, things like that. But I think it really applies to dating of like, we don't have to be the most like dazzling, have the best stories in the world. If we are interested in what they're saying, they will enjoy us more than if we had the most fascinating, captivating stories to tell.
Absolutely. What other advice do you find yourself giving your audience?
Oh, what advice do I give?
Yeah, like around dating. Like, I want to learn from you.
Oh my God. A big one is the faking confidence. I'm curious your thoughts on this, but I remember back in my dating phase, what was helpful for me is it was so easy to get into like, oh my God, I'm so awkward and I'm so uncomfortable. And I had to tell myself, no, you're not. You're amazing. You look great. And I might have doubted that. I might not have really believed it, but I had to like tap into the persona, like the confident version of me. And for a little bit, it felt fake. It felt like fake to be confident because I know deep down I wasn't. But I learned that that's what the confidence is. You know, if I wanted to go and talk to someone and reach out to them, it takes a fake layer of confidence, not a real layer of confidence. And I know that maybe sounds weird, but so many people wait and think I have to feel fully confident before I'm ready. It's kind of like the, what is it, the hesitator that you talk about where they're like, I am not ready. I'm not confident enough yet to go out and talk to this person. And I find if you put on that fake sense of confidence, I almost feel like it's like this kind of costume
Like a
that you
cloak.
put on. Yeah. That you can tap into that and be like, no, I'm confident. I'm just going to act like it. I'm going to pretend like I'm confident and go up and talk to them. That was the biggest thing that always helped me because the more that you do that, the more you actually then become confident because then you realize, oh, yeah, I can do this. People respond to me. It's actually no big deal. I actually am confident. And also, a lot of like dating should be fun. That may be actually different advice than you have. But what I have found is so many people that are like, dating sucks. I hate dating. And I just think it's such a bad space to be in. If you're living your life trying to find your person and you're feeling like this is the worst thing ever, can you change the way that you think about it? You know, can you look at it like, how fun. I'm going to go to this new restaurant I've never tried before and get to meet someone new and practice my conversation skills. Can that be fun for you? Like, can you look at it a different way so that it's not, this sucks, and you get to look at it like, it's so fun. Some friends I've had that get into that, like, I'm exhausted mindset. I know it's so much more complicated than that. And sometimes you really do need a break. But I'm like, pretend like you're Carrie Bradshaw and remember that you're a young, hot, amazing woman that gets to go live her life and get to do whatever you want. Like tap into that headspace so that dating doesn't feel like this, like, ugh, dating sucks. It can actually be fun if you think about it in a different way.
Right. I definitely been thinking about that too, where I feel like a lot of people now have the identity of I'm not dating. And I feel like you can say like, I'm taking a break from dating, or I haven't met anyone recently, but I think a lot of times people are so black and white about these things, like I'm dating or I'm not. It's like, can you just be open to meeting someone, even if right now that's not your biggest priority? But I think saying like, I'm not dating right now is almost sending energy out that's telling people that you're not open to connections.
So true. That's such a big one I hear. What qualities do you find that people overemphasize when it comes to finding a long-term partner, and what qualities should they focus on instead? Like what qualities actually determine long-term happiness?
So a lot of people focus on things that are really easy to measure. So if the person has a similar personality to you, or if you have the same hobbies, I think people really overemphasize looks and money. And of course, those things matter, but to a lesser extent than people think they do. And then the things that we find matter more than people think they do for long-term relationship success involve emotional stability, kindness, loyalty, the ability to make hard decisions together, the ability to fight well, and what's become the most important one to me, which is what side of you they bring out.
I love that. Who you are with them matters so much. Yeah. And I love that also, to fight well, like that capability. One of my aha moments for me in my relationship was years ago. My therapist told me, because again, I had a little bit of the perfectionist where I'm like, oh, if he's leaving his socks on the floor or he's in a bad mood, then he's not my person. And my therapist was like, everyone's going to be imperfect. It's not about what they do. It's about how they respond when they do something that hurts you. And that was a big aha moment of like, it's about how you work together and communicate. And again, fighting is not a bad thing. Like I think some people are like, if we're going to fight, that's it. We're done. That's not good. It's how you fight and how you communicate. And if they never put you down, even when they're really mad, like those things are what really make a difference instead of just the, oh, we should never ever fight.
Right. I totally agree. It's a great point from your therapist, which is it's not to find somebody who you don't fight with. It's how do they respond when you tell them that you hurt your feelings, and do they seem to want to make a change?
What about the spark, the concept of the spark? I know that you've said that this is misleading in the context of finding true love. So I'm curious for people who are waiting to find the spark. What do you say to them?
So I say, yes, the spark exists. And when it does, it's really fun. But this isn't something that you necessarily need to start a great relationship. Watch out for the fact that sometimes the spark is actually anxiety and it's your brain telling you, I'm not sure how this person feels about me. Or sometimes you have the spark in the beginning, but it fades. And so if you have the spark, that's great. But there's also so many great relationships that can grow when you get to know someone over time and they're more of a slow burn.
I think that's so true. I have been like a hopeless romantic my whole life, and I was always, find the spark. And I do feel like I had that initial spark with my fiance. But what I've learned as an adult is a lot of people, when they're talking about the spark, it actually is that anxiety of like, I feel like I have to chase someone. And if someone's not chasing them, or if they're not needing to chase someone else, if someone is like, I'm here for you, I'm stable, I'm safe, I got you, it feels like, oh, there's no spark. It's not interesting because the spark for them was that toxic dynamic.
Yeah, right.
So I totally hear you. And I have learned that as an adult. The day I became an adult is the day I realized the spark is not always as like romantic as we think it is. A lot of times it is that toxic pattern more than it actually says anything about long-term success.
I agree.
We're going to wrap up with some rapid fire questions, Logan. A song or album that you would recommend to listen to before a first date?
So I really like to listen to cheesy pump up music. So probably something from DJ Khaled. Like I like that old song, I'm the One. I think that's a good pump up song.
Oh my God, I love that song. That's such a good one. Your favorite portrayal of love in pop culture. So like any movie, TV, celeb couple, anything.
So there's this trilogy of movies that started in 1995 with the Before trilogy. And then there's two sequels. There's Before Sunset, which came out in 2004, and Before Midnight, which came out in 2013. And so as you can see, they really come out about every 10 years. And they show this couple from their first really hot romantic meeting on a train to meeting up again years later to what it's been like to be married for a while and have kids. And I feel like there are super romantic parts and super sad parts, and the way that they fight and they emote just feels to me really realistic.
That's just like really true of a real life couple. That's so interesting. Okay, I have to watch that. And last question for you, Logan. Fill in the blank. If everyone had this one habit, it would change their life.
If everyone got better at giving and receiving feedback, it would change their life.
I couldn't agree more. That's an amazing answer. Logan, where can everyone find you and get your book?
Everyone can find me on Instagram at Logan Ury. They can go to my website and take that quiz or join up for my weekly newsletter. And then my book is How to Not Die Alone.
Amazing. Thank you, Logan. This is like all the dating advice you would ever need. This was amazing.
Thank you so much for having me.
You enjoyed the episode. I know I sure did. Please do not forget to rate, review, and subscribe. It really makes a huge difference for our show so we can keep growing and bringing the content that you love. If you want more info, you can find us at the Evergirl Podcast on Instagram or theevergirlpodcast.com. Talk to you next week.